If you haven't started a video podcast and the FOMO is keeping you up at night, your social media is inundated with videos of people showing off their fancy microphones with outfits, laughing and having fun, and you think, that could be me, or that should be me. And it will be you, because in this video, I will share how we create our video podcast content jefe, from planning the episodes to the equipment and software we use, all the way until it's posted and distributed to the podcast, video, and social media platforms. No more FOMO. You will be podcast, camera, and action. If you're having the itch to start a video podcast or introduce video to your audio-only podcast production workflow, you are in the right. Video podcasting is the way to make content these days. And it's because how powerful this type of content can be. With a video podcast, you have the audio component, which can be shared on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the other podcast players. You also have the video component, which you can share on YouTube, all social media platforms, and Spotify. And yes, Spotify supports video too. More on that later in this video. And as a content and podcast coach, my number one recommendation for clients is to jump right into making a video podcast, because it gives them the reach and exposure their podcast deserves. Because they're not limited to publishing their podcast on the podcast players only, which, if you don't know, podcast players do not put your podcast in front of listeners inside the platforms themselves. So if you don't have a big audience for your podcast from the get-go, it does not matter how well produced and how incredible your content is, your podcast will fall into the void where only a few people will find it.
Hello? Is anybody listening? Subscribe to my podcast?
But if you have a video podcast, you can give your content a chance to be found by posting your video podcast on YouTube. YouTube's algorithm suggests content to people based on interest and user behavior. So even if you're new on YouTube and your channel is small, if your video podcast is good and your audience watches it, likes it, or shares it with other people, YouTube will suggest your content to similar users even if they don't subscribe to your channel. Your video podcast can also be repurposed into short vertical videos that can be posted on social media platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and LinkedIn. This is why video podcasting is such an efficient way to make content. Okay, now let's switch gears and talk about how we plan our episodes for our video podcast. And the first thing I do is keyword research. And if you don't know what I mean by keywords, let me get you up to speed. Keywords are words or phrases people type on search engines like Google and YouTube to find videos and blogs that answer their questions. You probably found this video because you typed how to start a video podcast and YouTube or Google suggested this video to you. Well, you want to use keywords in your content because they tell the algorithms that your content answers that specific search. That's how your content gets found by new people. The world of keywords and SEO can get pretty complicated, but you can start using TubeBuddy and Answer the Public. TubeBuddy is a Google Chrome extension that gives you access to Keyword Explorer. You type your target keyword in the Explorer bar and it will give you information about that specific keyword. Answer the Public is also a tool I use to find relevant keywords for my niche. What I like about this tool is that it generates reports with the number of monthly searches and different word combinations for that specific keyword. I use keywords not only to optimize my content, but also to understand what my ideal audience needs help with. So my advice, always start with keywords. Once I have my keywords, I outline my episodes if I'm batch recording. And here's a pro tip. If you know you will be repurposing your video podcast into short vertical videos, organize your outline in topics and main topics that can make for standalone videos for you to share on IG Reels or TikTok. Now that you have your episodes planned, it's go time. So let me show you what we use to record content jefe. Let's start with the camera. We use the Sony a7 Mark III camera with a 35mm lens. And let me tell you, this is a fantastic combo. The camera captures everything with stunning clarity, and the lens adds that beautiful professional depth that makes our video podcast pop. It keeps us looking clear and the background softly out of focus, so you feel like you're right here in the studio with us. When we're both on set recording the podcast, we use two of the slick Shure SM7B microphones. And if you don't feel sexy and like you have your shit together when speaking into one of this, I don't know what else you need. They have this cool professional look that adds a touch of class to our set, but they're also great at catching the sound of our voices with that kind of clarity and warmth that makes you feel like you are right here with us. I love these bad boys. The SM7B is an XLR microphone, so both of our mics are connected to the SSL2 Plus audio interface, which is plugged into our laptop. You can't have a video podcast without good lighting. Depending on where we record, we use 2 to 3 lights. The first 2 are a pair of newer LED panel lights with soft boxes. These are the perfect all-around light for most small to medium-sized rooms. When we're in a larger room and need a bigger fill light, we incorporate this Amaran 100D with a lantern softbox attached to a C-stand. Now that we have covered all of the equipment, how do we record the thing? How do we record our video podcast? When we're both on set, we record the audio into our DAW or audio recording software on our computer and the video into our Sony camera, which is stored on an SD card. We hit record in both the camera and the DAW, and before we start talking, we clap so it's easy for our editors to sync the audio and the video. If we're recording interviews remotely, we use professional video podcast solutions like Riverside FM or Squadcast. We like to use these two instead of Zoom because they prioritize audio and video quality. This means that your remote interviews will sound and look so good, almost like your guest is right there with you in the studio. You can use Riverside or Squadcast if you're recording your podcast solo as well. The good thing is that you don't need a computer with a lot of storage because the files are stored in the cloud, and you can even make minor edits in the recordings using the cloud-based software. But if you record your video podcast solo, talking head video podcast style, then the software or solution I recommend for you is Descript. I've been using Descript and the technology is mind-blowing. You can use a simple setup like this one on my desk with the Sony ZV-1 and the Shure MV7, which is a USB microphone you can plug into your computer and record your video podcast into Descript. What's powerful about Descript is that you can edit your video podcast like a Word document. It's insane. You can also add transitions, title cards, B-roll, and animations. It's so good. If you're editing your own video podcast, this is the best way to go. It will save you time, I promise. And don't worry, I'm adding the links to the software and the recording gear I use for Content Jefe in the description below. But because we don't have time to edit our video podcast and we like our video podcasts to have fancy intros and transitions, we send our audio and video files to our editors who add all the post-production magic to turn those files into an amazing experience for our viewers and listeners. Also, in post-production is where you can ask your editor to extract vertical videos for social media. Our editors choose peak moments from the episodes and add captions, emojis, transitions, B-roll, and make them more catchy to our friends on social media with very short attention spans, like me. After we get all of our goodies back, meaning our video podcast and short videos, then we start with the posting and distribution. And this is the most time-consuming part for us because at the time I'm posting this video, we don't have a content distributor and we make a lot of content. So let me walk you through the process. First, we post the video on the Content Jefe channel. For YouTube, you have to create a thumbnail, a title for the episode with your keywords, and a description. Thumbnails on YouTube are very important because a bad design can be the difference between people watching your episode or not. So we go through a few designs until we arrive at our final draft. There are other steps you have to follow to optimize your video, but we're not going to get into that for the sake of time. After we have posted the episode on YouTube, we do the same on Spotify. If you want your video podcast to be on Spotify, you have to host your podcast on Spotify for Podcasters. This is where we host our Content Jefe podcast. From Spotify for Podcasters, you can also set up distribution of the audio to Apple Podcasts and other podcast players. After your video podcast episode is posted on YouTube and the podcast players, it's time to share it with your followers so they can go and watch your content. This is why creating short videos from the episode is a smart way not only to grow your social media, but to turn your followers into regular listeners of your show. I post the videos our editors created from Content Jefe to Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts. I also create a community post on YouTube talking about the episode. Community posts pop up on your subscribers' feed. That way, if for some reason they did not get your notification about your new upload, they will find out through your community post. Making a video podcast seems easy, but it requires a lot of planning, strategy, and find the right workflow so it doesn't become a time sucker, especially if you're running a business and have limited time to make free content. We specialize in helping creative CEOs to launch their video podcast. So if you want to work with the Pod Sound School team, go to podsoundschool.com for more information. And if you're interested to dig a little deeper into content creation and video podcasting, I have this playlist right here where I curated my best videos about video podcasting, content marketing, and more. Go watch it.